Skyrim has a problem on its hands. A real problem, a tangible one. No, it's not the Civil War. Sometimes grown men LARP in the park. Best not stare and just move along. No, it's not even the dragons. Let's be honest, they are to Skyrim what alligators are to Floridians. No, the real problem in Skyrim is that the entire nation is less than 2 months away from mass starvation. I'm talking empty cities, barren fields, and farmers getting mugged for their last leek levels of bad. Your average Nord doesn't need a sword, they need a sandwich. Even if every hold pulled together every crop, every egg, every drop of milk, and whatever the hell passes for food in Blackreach, they'd still come up short. Forget the Civil War, this is about the calorie war, and the enemy is winning. The numbers are worse than you think, mostly because you haven't thought about them. Don't worry, you're the healthy one here. Envy Ranger & Co., on the other hand, has been hired by Jarl Ballgrifter to take a look at the nation's agricultural scene, and all I've seen is a bunch of hobbyist gardeners pretending that they're feudal farmers. He thinks Whiterun Hold, the nation's breadbasket, is being taken advantage of. Ballgoof thinks this because other holds are noticing their population of bodybuilders are hungry, so they ask him for food. At the same time, his own population of bodybuilders are also asking for more food. They're saying, "We're jacked, bro. Cabbage and goat milk isn't gonna cut it." He offers them ale. They say, "Empty calories, bro gruff. We need grains for gains." In all seriousness, because this is clearly a very serious topic, NPC lives matter too, Skyrim, as far as video games go, has a ton of farms scattered all over the place. They grow cabbage, leeks, potatoes, wheat, gourds, chickens. No, they don't grow chickens, but they do have chickens, cows, and goats all about. But is it enough for a population of hulking brutes with washboard abs and hangover appetites every single day? Well, first we need to ask, how many people actually live in Skyrim? Now, if you're a bandit, a draugr, or anything that hisses at sunlight, sorry, you don't count. We're looking for the civilian population here. Lucky for me, the lovely people over at the UESP already counted. The Hold's combined totals add up to 648 people, but then there's another 11 coming from somewhere that bring the final total to 659. The Rift, that's where Riften is, comes out on top as the most populous hold with 118 people. The average daily calories needed for a male is about 2,500 and about 2,000 for a female. So we'll split the difference and meet in the middle at 2,250 calories needed per person. Now all we have to do is multiply that by the Rift's total population and you get 265,500 calories per day just to keep them alive. And that's before you factor in feast culture and the Skyrim tradition of leaving food all over the place like it's free. Honestly, considering these people look like they've been carved out of mead barrels and manual labor, the real number might be even higher. But judging by what they're producing, I think it's time to start cutting. So my next step was to do an investigation into the Rift's agricultural output. These holds have farms, tiny settlements, orc strongholds, mining towns, and so on that often contain varying crop plots and livestock counts. I tracked down every relevant location I could find to figure out what they're actually packing. Follow me over to the Rift's Serethi farm for an example. They have 0 cabbage, 0 leeks, 0 wheat, 7 gourds, 12 potatoes, 2 chickens, 1 goat, and a ghost cow. I ran those numbers for every location, slapped realistic calorie values on each crop and animal product, assume with some Skyrim magic they pop out at least 1 item per day, and totaled it all up. That's how you find out what a hold is really producing. And the numbers are staggering. The entire hold of the Rift has a daily agricultural output of 18,887 calories. That's a problem. This leaves the Rift in a calorie deficit of 246,613 calories a day. Now I know some of you smart farts out there are thinking, oh, but they can hunt and fish. Sure, but this seems like a feudal society, not a hunter-gatherer buffet. Hunting happens, but can it really close a 250,000 calorie gap? Well, let's find out. A study from the University of Wyoming, which I think is pretty close to Skyrim, found that a bull elk provides an average of 220 pounds of meat, while a cow elk yields about 170. That leaves us with an average yield of 195 pounds at 500 calories per pound. Don't worry, you don't need to remember these numbers. There isn't a test at the end. But you do need to remember that to wipe out the rift's food deficit before it wipes out the rift, they'd need about 2.53 elk every single day. That's 924 elk per year just to feed this one hold. This isn't Cabela's hunting sim. They'd send the elk to the same place we sent the dodo bird with those kind of numbers. And even if they did, you think there's nearly 8 times as many elk as people in Skyrim's most populous hold. In your headcanon? Maybe. In the Skyrim we can actually observe, the answer is no, not even close. So now you say, okay, what about fish? A 10-pound salmon should give you about 7 pounds of edible fillet, according to the Reluctant Gourmet. That means the rift would need a conveyor belt of 39 salmon every day, 14,235 a year, just to keep the forever bulk bros from starving. Even if they decided to get all tactical and split it evenly between hunting and fishing, you're still looking at nearly 500 elk and over 7,000 salmon per year just to avoid starvation. This feudal hold of 118 mostly non-hunting and non-fishing milk drinkers is not pulling that off. But here's the real kicker. It's not just the rift, and while the rift is in bad shape, it's not even the most starvingest hold. That crown goes to the Reach, where you either live in the hills dressed like a Flintstones extra, or in a city of cannibals actively choosing to sleep on beds made out of stone. You know, suddenly the Namira cannibal cult in Markarth makes perfect sense. The hold is running on a 250,000 plus calorie deficit every day. And that's not even counting the Flintstone Forsworn that run most of the region. They're not in the civilian population numbers, but they are still out hunting and raiding, aka competing for the same food the quote-unquote civilized population still needs. The Reach is the second most populous hold at 114 people, just 4 shy of the Rift, plus a likely larger uncounted Forsworn headcount. Put all that together and it's no wonder why this hold is teetering on the edge of collapse. So which holds aren't starving? Who's actually producing the food for Skyrim? Surely it has to be Whiterun, the breadbasket of the province. Even its smaller settlements of Riverwood and Rorikstead have ample farming and livestock compared to most of the nation. Take a moment. Okay, 171,673. That is Whiterun's daily calorie deficit. The breadbasket of Skyrim can't feed itself, let alone the entire country. We don't have herds of mammoths here, people. We've got a handful, and every one of them is under giant Union protection. Literally. Sure, you can raid that pantry maybe once or twice. You might lose a few hunters along the way. Silver lining, that's a few less mouths you already can't feed. PETA might try and farm me for this, but if mammoth farming was a thing, Whiterun only needs about 6 per year to erase that calorie gap. Just 6. The problem is, that only fixes Whiterun's food shortage. The second Whiterun starts stacking up the mammoth steaks, every other hold is going to show up with spears and shopping lists. Now it's not just famine, it's mammoth wars brought to you by Animal Planet. And that's before we even get into all the boring logistics like, how do you butcher a multi-ton ice cow without refrigeration? Do you even have enough salt or barrels to store it all in? And how do you haul 10 million calories of meat through bandit country plains? And while we're asking questions, are we sure it's illegal to eat the giants too? I'm just saying it seems wasteful. Look, people in the Reach are eating each other. Don't act like giant steak is where we suddenly draw the line. Regardless of where we decide to draw that line, the bottom line as things are now is mammoths are not a food system. They're a one-time heist with a giant-shaped boss fight. Ah yes, Skyrim's proud capital, Solitude, and its surrounding hold of Hafingar. Surely they have their finger on the pulse of Skyrim's food supply, right? Wrong. The only thing they got their finger on is the bronze medal for starvation, clocking in with the 3rd largest caloric deficit in the country, over 200,000 calories in the red every time the sun drops the beat. To make matters worse, their agricultural production is comically low, only beating out the Hjaalmarch's swamps and Winterhold's permafrost. Their imports have to be through the roof. Oh, it all makes sense now. No wonder High King Torg died to Ulfric's shouts. He was a bag of bones by the time he met his hero. That wasn't a political assassination, it was a mercy killing. I'm just saying, if your dinner is going to depend on weather in the sea of ghosts, you are only one bad storm or one slick pirate away from starvation, as if you weren't already 6 feet deep in it to begin with. I have a feeling you're starting to get the trend at this point. The Rift, the Reach, Halfengar, Whiterun Hold, these aren't the exceptions, they're the rule. And that rule is law across all of Skyrim. Not a single hold is producing enough food for its people. Not even close. Who's got the best case scenario? Morthal's swampy pit in Hjaalmarch, and that's only because no one wants to live there. Their calorie deficit is the smallest in Skyrim simply because their population is the smallest. 26 people sipping swamp water and munching on toadstools is peak living in this part of the world. And hey, if things get rough enough, at least they're surrounded by death bells. Nonetheless, they are all still in a deficit. Sure, I'll concede, it's possible that Falkreath's deep forests could keep its people fed with venison for a while, and Dawnstar up in the Pale might pull in more fish and horker meat than the rest of Skyrim combined, who's to say? But Winterhold? Hopeless. If the college mages were quietly feeding that city, the locals wouldn't despise them, they would worship them. That city didn't collapse off a cliff in some mysterious event, I don't care what you heard. It looked over the edge, thought about what it had to work with, and jumped. That leaves us with Eastmarch, home of Windhelm. There are quite a few farms outside of the city, pretty similar to Whiterun. The obvious issue here is the quantity of crops being produced. These are small gardens, not farms. The biggest farm they have to offer is Hollyfrost, with a staggering 11 wheat, 1 chicken, and 2 goats. My real-life neighbor has more going on in their backyard, and we're 5 minutes from a city and 2 minutes from a grocery store. What's sort of interesting to me is that Darkwater Crossing and Kynes Grove, which, by the way, aren't even farms, they're mining settlements, have the largest agricultural output in the entire Eastmarch. They're easily doubling the output of any individual farm near the walls of Windhelm. We can see this consistently across the board. The Chillfurrow farm outside of Whiterun has 10 cabbage, 7 wheat, no leeks, no potatoes, no gourds. 2 chickens, 1 cow, no goats. They can't kill that cow and eat it without cutting off their own milk supply. You want to keep the eggs? Better leave them chickens alone. Of course I'm being absurd. This comes down to game engine limitations. No one's actually blaming them for prioritizing the NPC population over the leek population. Except me. The biggest problem is that the farms have all this empty space, soil just going to waste, and real estate basically in outer space. So let's keep being ridiculous. Skyrim's daily agricultural output is just above 166,000 calories, but its total population, again, is somewhere between 648 and 659 across its 9 holds, putting the total caloric need of the country somewhere between 1.45 and 1.49 million calories a day. The farms truly only cover about 10% of what the nation needs, leaving a province-wide shortfall of over 1.3 million calories per day. How do we fill that gap? Well, you would need 13.6 elk a day, but you can't just ask an elk for 60% of itself and then send Bambi back into the woods. That's cruel, certainly unusual, and frankly, a weird thing to imagine. So we're going to need 14 elk per day and almost 5,000 annually. We're talking over 75,000 salmon, or just shy of 50 mammoth a year, people. And listen, I'm still holding out for them to bring back the mammoth in our world with Crisco technology. Or CRISPR, whatever it is. So if you're going to take the mammoth extinction route to save Skyrim, you're going to have to go through me. If Skyrim wanted to solve its national starvation problem by evenly splitting the effort between these 3 sources, the annual shopping list would be over 1,600 elk, over 45,000 salmon, and 16 precious mammoths. And that's assuming perfect efficiency, no spoilage, no lost kills, and no giants trampling the hunting party. If we skip all that nonsense and try and properly scale the agriculture to meet the population's needs, Skyrim would need over 1,100 more cabbages, 700 plus leeks, 1,200 plus potatoes, and hundreds more wheat bushels, gourds, chickens for eggs, and cows and goats for milk. That's a 640% plus increase across the board, more than 7 times the current production, just to hit the bare minimum. And every single one of these enormous Nords is going to end up looking more like a dark elf or start acting a lot more like a wood elf by the time we're through. Okay, anyway, the reality is these farms are barely relevant to the game in the first place. They exist as more of a decorative nod than a functioning agricultural system, and to rub salt in the wound, which they probably can't afford to do, several farms were cut from the final game, like the Barley Dark farm, intended for Whiterun Hold to make the breadbasket even more bountiful, and Frost River farm, which would have added a bit of much-needed agriculture near Morthal in the Hjaalmarch. There are easily 40 to 50 farms or farm-like locations in a game about fighting dragons and yelling at people. They serve to fill out the world and add a layer of realism while being nearly irrelevant to the player's experience. The farmers aren't selling you a leek so you can get a boost to your carry weight. You can do some work, which is basically just looting them and then giving it back to earn some gold. Most people have never done that though. I know some of you have, yes, I'm looking at you. Really, they just exist so the world feels more alive. So you can wander into some random village and see a goat chewing grass by a fence while some guard mutters about getting an arrow in. It's not enough food to keep Skyrim's population alive for a week, but that's not really the point. In places without big farms, you'll still find little patches of crops and backyards and a couple of chickens pecking around. How do the people eat? Well, your answer is right here. The devs sat there and thought about the NPCs needing food, and while it clearly isn't enough, it's pretty cool that it's there at all. I finally made my way back to Jarl Balgriffsson and drama dropped a pile of parchment paper on the table in front of him. Most of it was just cabbage counts and elk doodles, to be honest, but I don't think he can read anyway. My Jarl, I regret to inform you that we can't even feed Whiterun. The rifts, rivers, and lakes are fished to the bone. The Reach is one more Forsworn raid away from slipping back out of the Stone Age. Halfingar is basically a food desert, and if your farms don't start planting more potatoes yesterday, we'll be holding the next royal feast locked in a broom closet, snacking idly by while an angry mob burns down your hold and slaughters your people. And the people of Skyrim might be starving, but if you're hungry for some more content, check out a video I made about Fallout 4's absurd highway system. Appreciate you watching if you made it this far. Like and subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll see you in the comments.